everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Student Spotlight, where we showcase some of the work our past students have done. I'm Ingrid, and with me here today is Isla, who participated in the Rethink Essay competition this year. It is our pleasure to have her on this episode and have her share her experience with us. To start things off, Isla, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what year of high school you're in, and what your academic interests are?
Yeah, I'm Isla. I'm currently going into my last year of school, and I chose to do the Rethink Essay competition because I was really fascinated by the prompt, especially sort of the reprogramming of cells to allow people who can't have children to have children, but also to help endangered species.
Mm-hmm. Have you had experience with similar competitions in the past, like be it essay competitions or very intensive research competitions?
So I've done a couple of other essay competitions, one of which I wrote about the history of aspirin and how we sort of developed it from willow bark to the sort of the everyday pill, which so many people take. And I've done quite a few essay competitions since the CCIR, but this was my second competition that I did. And I think it was really helpful because actually the skills I learned of how to research for this competition have really aided me going forward to do other competitions too.
Mm-hmm. Is biotechnology something you want to pursue in your higher education once you're done with high school?
I'd quite like to study natural sciences, so I think biotechnology would potentially come under that branch. I think it's a really interesting sort of branch of science as well, with all of the developments that are going on in the field currently. So I think if I do have the potential to sort of go into it in the future, I definitely would take the opportunity to do so.
Mm-hmm. For our listeners who are new to the Rethink Essay competition, it's an annual competition, and the mission has always been to promote critical thinking and exploration of a wide range of thought-provoking and often controversial subject matters. This year, 10 essay prompts were contributed by professors from our unique faculty network, including mentors from Harvard, Brown, UC Berkeley, Cambridge, Oxford, and MIT. And along with each prompt, a list of recommended reading is also provided to encourage students to dive into each subject matter from various perspectives. So Isla, you did highlight that you really are interested in biotechnology. Could you share what the prompt you chose was and I guess what initially drew you to the topic?
Yeah, so the prompt I chose was, should we move forward with in vitro gametogenesis further? And in vitro gametogenesis, also known as IVG, is basically the reprogramming of somatic cells in mammalian bodies into germ cells. And this allows for people of any sex to have children together, but it also helps preserve endangered species because it's basically another form of assisted reproductive therapy. The current most sort of common assisted reproductive therapy is IVF, but this is quite different because it would allow people of the same sex to have biological children together, basically. And I was drawn to it because I thought that, especially after all that humans have done to the planet so far and are continuing to do with the sort of the threat to endangered species, and also the high rates of infertility in the world at the moment, I thought it was a really relevant topic to do, and I wanted to understand more about what was going on to tackle these issues.
Did you find that there was a lot of resources on this topic? Because I can imagine it's still relatively new in like the kind of overall history of academia. Can you share if you had any kind of challenges with finding resources to support your research?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I use Google Scholar, which I thought was a really helpful way of sort of making sure that I was only really looking at scientific papers and not so much sort of just hearsay on the internet, because I think there's a lot of that when it comes to new forms of technology, especially when it's tackling lots of issues that are quite prominent in our society. I found it hard initially to sort of work out where I was going to focus my essay on, whether I was going to talk just about endangered animals or mainly about infertility. But once I decided that I was going to do a little bit of both, it was much easier because I could then research more specifically how IVG was being used to tackle these issues. And I think once you find a couple of papers on it, you then sort of can look towards their references and what did they then read. And I think that then helps you build up quite a big web of knowledge, which you can then sort of cherry pick from to make the essay.
So can you walk us through the process of working on your paper from start to finish, especially on a topic where you really have to like look for resources? How did you approach writing this essay?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just began by reading through quite a few different papers, just understanding the general idea of what IVG was, because prior to the essay, I'd sort of heard a bit about it and I was intrigued by it, but I didn't really understand the ins and outs of it that much. So I guess I just started by building up an understanding of like what it was, what it is, sorry, and then like how it's being used currently. And then from there, I guess I just went on to sort of think more specifically about what I would choose to focus on. And then I sort of went through and took notes on what had sort of stood out to me most in the things that I'd read so far, and then sort of started to accumulate a sort of list of things I wanted to include in my essay. And then I sort of formulated a plan. And then, to be honest, the writing part was probably the easiest part, because it was then just putting all those things that I'd sort of picked out into an essay and hopefully with an all right narrative.
Mm-hmm. So where can we see the prevalence of IVG being used in our society today?
Well, I guess currently the main issues are sort of the ethical side of things, and we haven't really seen it go into action that much recently because there are a lot of concerns around the ethical side of things. For instance, there's worries that it could be used in the wrong way to allow people to have like be solo parents, where there's simply one person who's the parent of a child, and that can lead to really bad things for the child because there's such a high chance of getting sort of genetic issues passed down. And also there's the issue of multiplex parenting, where there are multiple parents for one child, and that again brings up issues of sort of what's a generation, is the child going to have sort of issues, whether it be physical or sort of internal, we don't know. So I guess the main thing is like it's not really used at the moment to tackle these issues, but I hope in the future that the correct regulations are put in place so that it can be, because I think the main thing that's stopping it being used at the moment is just that people are scared it's going to go in the wrong way.
Mm. Can you tell us a little bit about what your paper was about or the argument you were ultimately trying to make?
Yeah, so I went through and I guess I'll start talking about the endangered species. So I sort of said like after we've had so many species go extinct, so many threatened with extinction now, it's really important to try and look towards how we can resolve this issue. And IVG does offer the potential to help resolve this issue because, especially where we have, say, only a couple individuals of a species left, even if they're perhaps of the same sex, it would allow endangered species to sort of reproduce, and we could then build up population numbers again. And it also means that you don't need to like move individuals of species to mate, but you can do it sort of in a lab, and this would allow things like endangered species to sort of hopefully restore numbers. I then also went on to speak more about humans and infertility in humans, and one of the things I found most shocking actually is how like prominent infertility is in our society, and a lot of people recalled how it's one of the most traumatic sort of experiences of their lives. So looking to sort of find a way to resolve that is really important. And I guess I then went on to argue how IVG could be really important, especially for people with cancer, because cancer impacts fertility often due to the treatment methods. And then I also spoke about how it could be used to help simply couples who are struggling to have a baby, perhaps who IVF hasn't worked for. And then I went on to talk about how it could potentially be used for people of the same sex who want to have couples. And I think this was one of the more nuanced arguments that I tried to make, because it's hard, I think, to justify, at least for some people, how same-sex couples could be sort of in line with the laws of health, if you like, because this is supposed to be restoring physical health. But then it's also, especially in recent years, we've come to appreciate how health is a state of physical and mental well-being, and therefore looking at this mental side of things, how actually IVG for same-sex couples could be restoring sort of mental health and helping with the psychological side of health, and therefore that it should be justified.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think this is even just, I mean, IVG is new to me. Like I'm really learning a lot from our conversation today, but there really is so many different like factors that goes into like whether this, not even just like whether this is possible. Obviously, there is science behind it now, but like the ethics of it, like how it will impact like future generations, and kind of like the pros and cons of like psychological effects and sociological effects. Like there's so many facets that you can kind of consider the ethics of IVG. So it sounds like there was a lot of directions that you were able to kind of consider for this topic. I want to extend my congratulations again on receiving the Bronze Award for your submission. To give our listeners an idea of the rigor of this competition, each submission undertakes 4 rounds of blind review by scholars from Cambridge, Oxford, Stanford, MIT, and several Ivy League universities. We saw over 4,200 submissions from more than 50 countries, and only 33 winners were awarded. And for Isla to receive this high distinction is an incredible achievement, so let's talk about it. What were your reactions when you first received this result?
I was really surprised, to be honest. I had written the essay quite a while ago, so I sort of had, I guess, slipped a bit to the back of my mind with other things with school and exams coming in. So when I got the email saying I got a bronze award, I was shocked. And then when I read that there were over 4,200 entries and that sort of you only got awarded if you came in the top 30, I was so surprised. And I was really delighted to have sort of my work recognised. And I think it gave me confidence as well to then go and enter more essay competitions, because it showed me that perhaps my writing style was sort of good enough to do that.
And along with just like even the writing part, you're able to kind of use this experience as a way to strengthen your research skills and like how you gather your resources. So I think there's a lot to be learned from kind of engaging even for like even though it literally is an essay competition, but there's so much more behind it. How do you think that this experience has changed you as a student as you're approaching your final year of high school and entering university?
It's helped me like affirm what I want to do at university. I definitely want to sort of study sciences and like progress lots of the research that I started to do for this project at a higher level. It's given me confidence to enter other essay competitions too. And I think it's also just made me a more rounded person, because I think learning outside of the curriculum, I think it helps me to sort of understand what the wider uses of what I'm learning are, because I think it gives me more incentive to sort of to learn and listen, and it makes things more exciting.
Mm-hmm. And as a celebration for the accomplishments of our participants, CCIR also hosted a symposium, including a dinner party which featured Nobel laureate keynote speakers at the University of Cambridge this year. And Isla was able to attend the dinner party. Can you share a little bit about your experience and what it was like to be in that environment with other peers and scholars?
Yeah, it was really nice to meet other people who'd entered the essay competition, and especially hear about what they'd written their essays on, because obviously, as you say, there were lots of different prompts. And hearing about what other people wrote was really interesting, because all of the prompts were so fascinating. It was also nice because I met another person who'd written the same prompt as me, and to discuss like what their conclusion was, what they discussed was really interesting, especially because they approached it from quite a different angle. So I found it really interesting just to hear other people's points of view on topics that are really interesting.
Yeah, I would say that I've spoken to a few more essay competition participants, and everyone chose a different topic, but it seems that each topic is like, there's so many ways to think about it that no two people will come to the exact same conclusion. So that is really fascinating with the prompts that we have for students to engage in for essay competition. So that leads to kind of my last question for you. What was your biggest learning from this competition, whether it's in your research work or just like through the entire experience?
To be honest, I think the biggest thing that I learned from this essay was really about what IVG is and what the future uses of it are. I think it's a technology that we will see advancing rapidly in the coming years once we've resolved some of the biggest ethical issues. And I think just having an understanding of it will make me really well placed when it comes to talking about things in the future, about IVG and about its future uses, because I'm really excited by its prospects and learning about what it is, how it can be used, and just what the barriers are that are preventing it being used at the moment are. It's super exciting, and I'm really happy to understand it more now.
It's definitely a very exciting new kind of science topic, and especially in our current world, I think there's just so many like there's opportunities. Like there's definitely pros for it, but also like there are conversations about whether that is the right thing to do. So I'm sure there's so much more to be learned. And like I think you're off to a great start because you already are ahead of so many of us. And you know so much more about this than the general public. So yeah, thank you for that would conclude our episode for today. Do you have any last words to share with our listeners before we wrap up this episode?
I guess just thanks for listening. And also, I would really advise if you're interested in science or any field, do go and enter essay competitions, because this has really helped me learn so much, both about myself, but also about a topic that is genuinely fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Isla, for joining us and sharing your experiences with our listeners. Congratulations once again on your success with the Rethink Essay competition, and best of luck with all your future endeavors.
Thanks very much.